Hey everyone, welcome to Pricing Guys. I'm Michael,
And I'm Avy.
and today we're going to follow up a little bit on the discussion we had last week. So we talked about where pricing should sit within the organization, sales, finance, marketing, and or a separate function. But we thought a fun follow-up might be to talk about some of the interesting types of people that we've met in the pricing function over the last 15 plus years and kind of, give a little bit of a description of who they are, how they operate, and what you gotta kinda look out for when you're
Yeah,
dealing with these people.
irrespective of where they are sitting, just people who are leading pricing teams, what those personalities look like. And what we're hoping is that you can take this away to look at your pricing team and think about, you know, who or what personality you're actually dealing with, and thinking
But
about, do you have the right personality for your organization to actually drive some change?
yeah, but I would also take this to the next step because I think, yeah, pricing team in general, like, yes, 100% this applies to the pricing team, but I think everything we're gonna talk about here could apply to really any team out there because it's more of like a management style and the kind of the type of leader that we see. Because 'cause I've seen a lot of these profiles in sales and marketing as well.
Yeah,
So
I think, what makes pricing, expertise a little bit different is not necessarily a formalized discipline yet. Like, if you're a finance person, if you're accountant, if you're a marketing person, there's, like, courses, right? And there's
well,
the
you
structured
finish school,
cases.
right? Like, you come out, people study marketing, people study, management, people study finance, whereas I know there's a couple courses out there, but no one's really studying kind of pricing and revenue management in school. Like, you might have taken a course or you might have done, something, but there's no formalized, real gold standard of education.
Well, and I think the problem, or I shouldn't say problem, a lot of the courses that are out there, they're highly analytical, right? Very highly analytical, talking about, hey, these are the different types of analyses. This is how you compile data, those sorts of things. And not saying that the analysis is critical and important to understand, but it's everything else around that,
Well,
right?
so that's a good segue because I think that brings us to kind of the first profile and first person that we see a lot of the time. It's like that super highly analytical person, um, who, might have like an advanced degree, can do a lot of great math, but that's probably where it ends, right?
Well, I think how you know that you got this person, they get excited at compiling like a bunch of data sources. They like to show you a whole bunch of graphs and new ways of looking at it. And hey, we detrended this and seasonalized this and found this correlation here and this and that and the other. But after you read like this, like 52-page deck with all these really cool Tableau or Power BI like outputs, it's like, I think the question that always comes from the business is, okay, so what? Right? Like, there was a lot of cool stuff and it looked really complicated and you used a lot of big words, but so what? What do we do? Where do we
Yeah,
go with this?
it's interesting because I remember, and we've met a lot of people through our journeys, and I remember one specific person who they were so interested in like making sure that the database was set up, that all the reporting was good, and it was weird because after like a year and a half, it's like, well, no one's taken a decision because all they've been doing is setting up the database and doing all that stuff. And you're absolutely right. It was like the organization was like, so like, what do you want to do? Let's take a decision. And there was just that inability to take the decision. It was all about the infrastructure, and they were worried that they needed to get the data perfect before they can make any decision.
I think more than that too, how you recognize if you've got this type of pricing organization, if your people are more so just sitting there modeling, compiling, and that's what they're spending 95% of their time, and you're not necessarily seeing those, to your point, those decisions, those actions being driven by the team, and here are the dollars associated with it. You probably got that, conceptual kind of thinker that's, like, thinking about, "Hey, what's going on with AI? How do we do this process? How do we get this, like,
Oh yeah,
blockchain
don't
going?"
get me started. Like now it's about that. And I think one of the biggest things I see is like the need for precision.
Mhm.
Uh and I remember specifically it was actually someone, it was one of our old consultants. And I remember he was working on some like elasticity calculation. And he was like, "Oh, I need to get it really precise." And he's spending like days and days and days. And eventually I asked him a question. I was like, "Well, how precise do you need to be?" like, what happens how off does your recommendation on the elasticity need to be for the business decision to change? And it was like, he had an elasticity of like, I don't know, -3 or something, in and around there, and it had to have been like minus like 35. So he had to have been like 10 times off before the business decision changed. And I think that's where a lot of these people who are kind of very data driven, they're not thinking about the business problem, the decision to take, and what impact it has on that. They're just so focused on getting the number right.
Well, I feel like they get so lost in the data, they're not actually understanding the core business drivers that are coming behind the data. Like, okay, I'm seeing how it comes in, but there's so many other things associated with that. How do our salespeople position that? How do we actually sell the offer? How do we incentivize our customers? What are we actually putting out in front of them? And if they don't have a keen understanding of these things, there's no way they can have an appreciation on what's actually driving these numbers or where do you need to go and what do you need to do? Because at the end of the day, a pricing team, it's within the name. The only lever you have to pull is pricing. And if that's really the only lever you're pulling, it's the most expensive lever to pull,
Yeah.
right? Uh,
I think you brought up kind of AI blockchain. I think that makes me think of another persona that we see. I call it the hype man or the hype woman,
mhm.
where and it's kind of they're loosely tied to this kind of data person. But what I find is like a lot of the times they don't necessarily have as much of the technical knowledge. Like they can't build the models and do all that stuff. But like they come in and blockchain or AI or analytics or whatever the buzzword of the day is, it is gonna change the game and it is gonna be huge. And what I find a lot of the time in these organizations is like this person just promises and promises and promises, and I think the same thing happens where, maybe some dashboards get put together, maybe not much happens. But again, you get further down the line and no decision is taken.
I see them as like the insurance agent, right? You talk to them and they're like, okay, I got you covered for like if it floods, if like lightning hits you, if this, that, and the other happens. But when it actually does happen and you run into some crap, it's like running into a wall and you realize you got
Yeah,
nothing, right?
yeah.
So you realize how little substance was actually
It's very
there.
pretty, but there's nothing like really, it's everything's made of cardboard at the end of the day, right?
The other personality that kind of segues in me into is, you know, we have these organizations that have very strong functional departments and they've got this pricing team and sometimes the leader of the pricing team and you'll know if you're dealing with these kind of leader because they'll talk a lot about collaboration and getting everyone's vote and understanding it, but I call them kind of the order taker where they run around, they take votes like it's like a democracy. We take
Oh,
votes, we try to total it up and okay, so now we're going to make this price change. And we were all on the same page. We all shook hands so we can all disperse the accountability around that. But this person is usually able to hide a fair amount of the time because they're just doing exactly what the organization want, but they're more of an administrator and
so
order taker.
I've seen this a ton, and the way I see it is everybody loves this person because they're easy to get along with, there's no controversy, but the results suck. And, like, what happens is, like, eventually you're just like, "Well, how come the results aren't coming in?" It's because it just they're not making the right decisions, they're making the decisions to minimize kind of the, uh,
Conflict.
conflict, that's a good
Yeah.
way to put it, yeah. And what happens is the business ends up suffering, and, you know, it's funny because a lot of the time, it takes a little bit of time to find out that, this is a bad way of going about it because people are hyped up because 'cause they're like, "Yeah, this is great, everyone's kind of involved," but, it's only after a certain period of time where you see the results come in and you're like, "Uh-oh, like, there's a problem."
The funny thing is the uh-oh, it'll never happen with the functional leaders. It always happens with the executive that's on top or who's on top of them that'll light the house on fire and say, I don't know what's going on, but this is a critical area. It's messed up. And the first person they shoot, it won't be those functional leaders.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
always the order taker that they're going to shoot
Yep.
first. And everyone's gonna be like, I don't know why these decisions were made, or I don't know, the process was broken and this person was responsible for the process. But,
First person to be
that's
thrown under the bus. It's a dangerous place to be.
exactly.
But I think the other thing with the order taker is, and the word order taker, I think a lot of the time is a little bit deceiving because sometimes it's like, well, one person wants a sandwich, one person wants a soup, someone else wants a steak, and then what ends up happening is nothing comes to the table. So a lot of the time, this order taker, like, no decision is actually being made because it's just debate and meeting and you're just spanning in circles and kinda having discussions and going in circles, and what I find a lot of the time is that sometimes it's the will of the person who's willing to outlast, especially in these functional leaders, where someone just throws up their hands and gives up and says like, "Alright, like, I can't meet on this anymore, like, we've discussed it here and here," and you end up getting kind of into this voting of like, "Okay, what do you think?" And let's all vote and kinda try and get on the same page.
I know we've spent a lot of time kinda talking about, "Hey, this is probably the what not to do," and maybe I'll put it across what I've seen is the best, and I know me coming from pricing, this will sound kind of idyllic, but, I kinda see the best is a pricing leader as a mini CEO. They understand the business as a CEO does. They understand how the different components and functions come together. They understand the critical items that actually drive a sale, and they're able to help coordinate and quarterback the organization together that these are the strategies we should execute. So they're not only able to function at that high strategic level, they can get very granular with working at, hey, do we have gaps in these areas? Now, why I call them the mini CEO is because they don't necessarily have all of that authority to go and execute across there. So one, they gotta be able to make relationships with people, but we used the word earlier, you're going to get in conflict. It's just the nature of it, and there's going to be conflict, you're gonna get to better places, but this is a real executor, right? Like, can really marshal the resources of the organization, and there's gonna be 500 priorities to go at. This is a person who's gonna be able to distill it down and say, from a pricing perspective, that'll give us the biggest bottom line, share, volume, whatever the corporate objective is. These are the 2 areas that we go after, and this is how we do it from a cross-functional basis. And they kinda marshal those resources and get everyone working together to go after.
So I don't disagree with you. I think everything you said makes ton of sense, but I think we might have mentioned in our previous discussion is like you're talking about a unicorn. Like, does this person actually exist? Because a lot of the times those personalities that we kind of talked about that might not be ideal, right? That we've seen kind of go upside down sometimes. They mask themselves as being able to do this, and they promise that they can not only think strategically, but also get into the details and the data. So, how do you test? How do you know? How do you really get to a spot where you found this person who can actually do that? Because I think it's one of those things that, yeah, it's very easy to say it, but to actually find that person and to be able to execute, it's a totally different game.
I think, first, let me ask, does this person exist? I
They do
I'm
exist.
not
I've seen that. I've
yeah,
seen
you've
them.
seen
Yep.
them, and they graduate to be like VP of sales,
Yeah.
VP of marketing, head of trade, and they move up, right? And they usually move up because they get recognized for what they can do. So 100% these people exist. Now, the second question that you asked, that's a tougher one, right? Like, how do you know that we're dealing with these people? Um, a couple questions I would ask myself is, okay, um, can I actually attribute performance results to this person? Right?
Yeah, 100.
Like, how much are they delivering versus how much, am I, putting out to this person? As I look at this person, are they pushing the organization or is the organization pushing them? If they're pushing the organization and they're driving the organization to action and different results, that tells me that that's a person that's kind of leading, or are they getting pulled along? That's another indicator, key indicator for me. That's kind of one of the critical ones. And, the last one for me is like, as I look at this individual, when there's a question that people don't understand, then they need to understand it at a granular level. Do they go to this individual because they know they can get some action oriented stuff that's going to be, actually have context across the organization, or are they not necessarily that source? So that for me is kind of the critical three. And if they are performing on those critical 3, like, yeah, you got your mini CEO there, and they're gonna go places. They're gonna drive results.
Yeah, I think I have a probably maybe a little bit of a simpler way of looking at it, and I
Sure.
think it's if the person's willing to sign up for accountability, but I think at the same time that they're balancing that approach of, "Hey, we're gonna get down into the detail and we're gonna do the math," but um, there's a lot of strategic context that needs to be had. And I think exactly what you said, there's always 500 things happening. It's a prioritization. And I find when you talk to these people, they're very, um, they're very locked in on we can't do everything. We have to figure out what are the things that are going to drive. And especially like, we've seen a ton of pricing people interview over the years. It's if they're promising you and saying we're going to do this and this and this before they even are sitting in the chair, like that's a huge red flag for me because what happens when you get in that chair, you gotta do that assessment. You gotta figure out what are the things that are gonna drive because it's gonna be different for every organization. It's gonna be different, across, you know, even parts of your business. So you gotta really think about what are those things that are gonna drive the actual value from a pricing standpoint.
Fair. So we hope you guys look at today, think about what teams you got in place or what team you want to put in place, and look for the right personalities.
Find that unicorn. See you
Thanks.
next time.